The knock on my door came at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, which was my day off, and anyone who knew me knew that was a CA Redinelson. I was sitting in my robe with a cup of black coffee, watching the morning news, when the sound rattled through the quiet house like a warning bell. I set the mug down and shuffled Tawa, RD the door, already running through the list of people who might be desperate enough to show up unannounced at this hour. My sister lived 3 states away. My daughter, Elise, was on a business trip in Chicago. The mailman didn't knock. That left only one possibility, and my stomach twisted into a knot before I even reached the handle. I opened the door to find Mark standing on my porch, his face pale and his eyes bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept in days. He was still wearing the same rumpled shirt from Sunday dinner, the collar stained with what looked like coffee or maybe TRS. Behind him, Diana sat in their black SUV with the engine running, her face obscured by the GLA re on the windshield, but I could feel her watching me like a hawk. She was always watching, always calculating, always waiting for me to slip up so she could pounce. "Mom, we need to talk," Mark said, his voice cracking on the last word. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if the weight of our last conversation had physically compressed him.
"Please.
Just give me 5 minutes." I stepped aside and let him in, though every instinct told me to slam the door and bolt the deadbolt. I had spent 3 decades learning to read my son's moods, and right now he radiated the kind of desperate energy that usually preceded a request for money or a confession of some disaster he needed me to fix. This time I suspected it was both. He followed me into the kitchen, his eyes rooting around at the familiar surroundings like a man who had just realized he was in a foreign country. My kitchen was small but filled with the mismatched ceramics I'd collected over the years, the framed photos of my children on the refrigerator, the old wooden spoon my mother had given me when I got married. Mark used to love this kitchen. He used to sit at the breakfast bar and tell me about his school day while I made him grilled cheese sandwiches. Now he looked at it like it was a museum exhibit, something to be observed from a safe distance. "You look terrible," I said, not bothering to soften the observation. I was past the point of coddling him. "I haven't slept," he admitted, slumping onto a stool. "I can't sleep. Diana's been crying for 2 days straight. She called her mother, and now her mother is calling me, and everyone is asking me what happened, and I don't know what to tell them." "Tell them the truth," I said flatly. "Tell them you called your mother a toxic influence, and then asked her for $50,000 for a party." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Mom, come on."
You know I didn't mean it like that."
I was frustrated. We were both frustrated. The wedding planning has been a nightmare. The vendors all demanding more money, and Diana's parents putting so much pressure on us to make this perfect. I snapped.
"People snap.
It doesn't mean you cut them out of your will." I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms, studying him the way I used to study my patients when they came into the ER with symptoms that didn't quite add up. I had been a nurse for 40 years, and I knew how to spot a lie dressed up as a confession. Mark was telling me what he thought I wanted to hear, not what he actually believed. "Tell me something, Mark," I said slowly. "If I had given you the money on Sunday, would you have called me the next day to apologize? Would you have showed up at my door and said, 'Mom, I'm sorry I said those things. I was wrong'?" He opened his mouth and closed it. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. He couldn't say yes because we both knew it wasn't true. If I had written that check, he would have taken it with a smile, driven back to Diana, and spent the rest of the week telling her what a relief it was that his mother had finally come to her senses. He would have felt vindicated, not remorseful. My refusal had forced him to reconsider, but only because he was afraid of the consequences, not because he regretted the words. "That's what I thought," I said, turning to pour myself another cup of coffee. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I had expected to feel shaky, emotional, maybe even guilty. Instead, I felt a cold CLA righty that I hadn't experienced in years. It was the same CLA righty I felt when I had to make a life-or-death decision on the floor of the ER, the kind of CLA righty that came from knowing there was no room for hesitation. "Mom, listen to me," Mark pleaded, sliding off the stool and moving Tawa RD me. He reached out to touch my arm and I pulled away. I know I screwed up. I know I said things I shouldn't have. But you can't just throw away 32 years of being a mother because of one stupid argument. That's not who you are. You're right. I agreed, turning to face him. That's not who I am. But you don't get to be the one who tells me who I am anymore, MARK. You gave up that right on Sunday when you agreed with Diana that I was breaking your family. You stood in my kitchen in the house where I raised you, and you told me I was the problem. You didn't say it with your mouth, but you said it with your eyes. I saw it. I felt it. And I believed you. He staggered back as if I'd shoved him. Mom, I didn't. You did. I cut him off. You looked at me like I was an obstacle, like I was something in your way. And you've been looking at me that way for years, MARK. I just didn't want to see it. I kept making excuses for you. He's stressed. He's got a lot on his plate. He'll come around when things settle down. But things don't settle down, do they? They just keep getting worse. Every time I help you, you need more. Every time I give, you take. And you never, not once, ever stopped to ask yourself what I needed. He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. It was the kind of crying he used to do when he was a boy, when he scraped his knee or lost a soccer game, the kind that was so quiet I almost missed it if I wasn't looking directly at him. I had always been able to fix that kind of crying. A bandage, a hug, a promise that everything would be okay. But I couldn't fix this. I couldn't fix the thing that had gone wrong inside him, the part that had convinced him I was the enemy. We didn't know you needed anything, he whispered. You never told us. You always acted like you had everything figured out, like you didn't need us. I didn't need you, I said, my voice harrowed. I needed you to need me, but not for my money, not for my house. I needed you to need me as your mother. I needed you to call me on a Tuesday just to say hi. I needed you to come over for dinner without asking for something first. I needed you to look at me and see a person, not a checking account. And you couldn't do that. You still can't. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand to stop him. I'm not done, I said. You came here today because you want me to change my mind. You want me to tear up that will and pretend the last 2 days didn't happen. You want me to write that check and smile and go back to being the old woman who gives you whatever you want so you'll love her. But I can't do that anymore, MARK. I don't have it in me. The well is empty. Then what do you want, he demanded, his voice rising with frustration. What do you actually want from me? Tell me, and I'll do it. I'll do anything. Just tell me what you want. I read at him for a long moment, searching his face for some hint of genuine understanding. All I found was desperation, a frantic scrambling to find the right combination of words that would unlock my bank account. He wasn't trying to understand me. He was trying to pacify me. I want you to leave, I said quietly. I want you to go back to your car and drive away, and I want you to stop calling me for a month. I want you to spend that month thinking about what you said to me and whether you actually believe it. And if, at the end of that month, you still think I'm the one who broke your family, then you have your answer. You never needed me in the first place. He stood there, frozen, his mouth hanging open in shock. He hadn't expected this. He had come prepared to argue, to negotiate, to plead. He hadn't come prepared to be dismissed. I watched the realization dawn on his face like a slow sunrise, the understanding that I wasn't going to budge, that I wasn't going to soften, that the door I had closed on Sunday was now bolted from the inside. 1 month, he repeated, his voice hollow. And then what? And then we'll see, I said. But I'm not making any promises, MARK. I spent 32 years promising you things. I promised to take care of you. I promised to protect you. I promised to always be there. And I kept every single one of those promises. But you didn't keep any of yours. You promised to respect me, and you didn't. You promised to love me, and you didn't. You promised to be a family, and you broke that promise the moment you agreed with Diana that I was the problem. He flinched at that, a sharp, wounded sound escaping his throat. I had struck a nerve, and I could see him struggling to process the blow. He had come here expecting to be forgiven, to be absolved, to be handed a check and sent on his way. Instead, I had handed him a mirror. "Get out," I said, pointing Tawa RD the door. "I need you to leave now." He didn't move. He just stood there, TRS still streaming, his whole body trembling with the effort of holding himself together. For a moment, I almost softened. For a moment, I almost reached out to pull him into a hug and tell him everything would be okay. But then I remembered Sunday. I remembered the look on his face when he agreed with Diana. I remembered the cold satisfaction in her eyes as she watched me squirm. And the tenderness evaporated like morning mist. "Now," I repeated, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. He walked to the door slowly, his feet dragging across the hardwood floor like he was slogging through mud. He paused at the threshold, his back to me, and I could see his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He was waiting for me to call him back. He was waiting for me to break. He had spent his whole life waiting for me to break, and I had never disappointed him. But this time, I didn't break. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible, "I love you." "Goodbye, Mark," I said, and closed the door. I stood there for a long moment, my hand pressed against the COL wood of the door, listening to the sound of his footsteps retreating down the porch steps. I heard the CA, our door open and close. I heard the engine rev. I heard the tires crunching against the gravel as he pulled out of my driveway. And then there was silence, the same heavy silence that had filled the house on Sunday, the silence of a door closing on an era. I walked back to the kitchen and sat down at the table, my coffee long since gone cold. I read at the wall, at the framed photographs of my children, at Elise's bright smile and Mark's gap-toothed grin, at the family we used to be before everything got complicated. I remembered the day Mark was born, the way he'd looked at me with those big, trusting eyes, the way he'd clung to my finger like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. I remembered the day he took his first steps, stumbling into my AR mess with a triumphant laugh. I remembered the day he graduated from college, and I cried in the audience because I was so proud of the man he'd become. I didn't recognize that man anymore. The boy I had raised had been replaced by a stranger who looked at me with contempt and spoke to me with disdain. And the hardest part, the part that kept me up at night, was wondering where I had gone wrong. Was it something I did, something I didn't do? Had I been too soft, too hard, too present, too absent? I had spent 40 years as a nurse, saving lives, making impossible decisions, staying calm in the middle of chaos. But being a mother had always been harder than being a nurse. Nurses got to go home at the end of their shift. Mothers never did. I picked up my phone and read at the screen. I had 3 missed calls from Diana's mother, a woman I had met exactly twice and who had never once shown me any RMTH. I had a text from Mark's childhood friend asking if I was okay. I had a voicemail from my attorney confirming that the updated will had been properly notarized and filed. The world was moving on, spinning 4-way RD, while I sat here frozen in my kitchen, trying to figure out how I had gotten to this place, but I wasn't frozen. Not really. I was thinking. I was planning. I was remembering all the other things I had wanted to say to Mark, but hadn't. All the accusations I had held back because I didn't want to hurt him. And as I sat there, ring at the cold coffee in my mug, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for him to come to his senses. I wasn't going to count the days until his month of silence was up, hoping he'd call and apologize. I wasn't going to live my life in limbo, waiting for a son who had already made it clear that I was a burden. I was going to take control. I picked up my phone and called my daughter. "Hey, Mom." Elise answered on the second ring, her voice bright and unbothered. "What's up? You never call me during the workday." "I need you to come home," I said. "I need you to come home and help me with something." "Help you with what?" she asked, her tone shifting to one of concern. "Are you okay? Is it Mark? Did he do something?" "It's a long story," I said, "and I'll tell you everything when you get here. But I need you to come home this weekend. I need you to look over some documents with me. I need you to be my witness." There was a pause on her end, the kind of pause that meant she was processing the gravity of what I was asking. Elise was a lawyer, a sharp, pragmatic woman who had inherited my ability to see through bullshit. She had always been the sensible one, the one who called me out on my soft spots and told me when I was being too generous. I hadn't told her about the will yet. I hadn't told her about the fight, but I knew she would understand. "Of course, Mom," she said finally. "I'll be there Friday. Just tell me what you need." "I need you to help me make sure that Mark never gets another penny from me," I said, my voice steady. "I need you to help me make sure that my money goes where I want it to go, not where he thinks it should go." Another pause. "Okay," she said slowly. "Okay, Mom. I'll be there. But are we sure about this once we do this? There's no going back." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. "I've been going back my whole life. It's time to move four-way road." We talked for a few more minutes, making plans, coordinating schedules, confirming details. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had been carrying the weight of Mark's needs on my shoulders for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. But now I was standing and I was ready to walk. That I spent the rest of the day doing things I had been putting off for months. I called the contractor and authorized the furnace repair. I went to the grocery store and bought myself a nice steak, something I never did because I always thought it was wasteful to see okay for one. I took a long walk around the neighborhood, waving to neighbors I hadn't talked to in years, feeling the sun on my face and the wind in my hair. And when I came home, I sat down at my desk and opened the leather folder that held my will. I read through every word, checking the language my attorney had drafted, making sure it said exactly what I wanted it to say. $12 million Marked for the things that mattered most. A scholarship fund in my late husband's name. A donation to the hospital where I had worked for 4 decades. A trust for my grandchildren, if I ever had any, that they couldn't access until they were 30, and only if they had proven themselves capable of managing money. And Mark's name, conspicuously absent.
No inheritance.
No property. No safety net. He had wanted to be free of me, and now he was. He was free to make his own way, to build his own life, to figure out what it meant to stand on his own 2 feet. It was the most loving thing I could do for him. Because I had realized, sitting in my kitchen with that cold cup of coffee, that I hadn't been helping him. I had been enabling him. I had been the safety net that caught him every time he fell, the emergency fund that bailed him out of every bad decision, the fallback plan he never had to think about. And as long as I was there, he would never learn to be a man. He would always be a boy, reaching out for my hand, expecting me to pull him up. But I was done pulling. I was done crying. I was done being the villain in a story where I had always been the hero. Friday came, and Elise arrived at my door with a bottle of wine and a stack of legal pads. She hugged me tight, longer than usual, and I felt her breathe a sigh of relief when I hugged her back. She had been worried about me, and I understood why. I had been so focused on Mark's drama that I had forgotten to take care of myself, and now I was finally putting myself first. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Mark had tried to negotiate his way back into my good graces, and we went over every document. Elise was thorough, asking questions, pointing out loopholes, making sure everything was airtight. She was a pit bull when she wanted to be, and I was grateful to have her on my side. "Mom, this is a lot of money," she said, setting down her pen. Sure you want to do this? I know Mark is a jerk. I know he hurt you. But this is a big step. It's the nuclear option." "Sometimes you have to go nuclear," I said. "Sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something new." Elise studied my face, her eyes searching for any hint of doubt. She found none. "Okay," she said, nodding. "Then let's do this." The doorbell rang at that moment, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through our conversation like a knife. Elise and I exchanged a look. We weren't expecting anyone, and Mark wasn't supposed to call for a month. But I knew it was him. I could feel it in my bones, the way I always knew when something was wrong with one of my children. I got up from the table and walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened it, and Mark was standing there, wild-eyed and disheveled, with Diana behind him. Her face was a mask of fury, her eyes blazing with a cold fire that made my blood run cold. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand, and I recognized it immediately. It was a copy of the will. Did you really do this? Diana demanded, thrusting the paper in my face. Did you really cut us out after everything we've done for you? I glanced at Mark, who was ring at the ground, his face pale and defeated. He hadn't wanted to come. She had dragged him here. And in that moment, I knew that nothing had changed. He was still the same boy, still following her lead, still letting her fight his battles. Yes, I said calmly. I did. Diana's face twisted with rage. You old witch, she spat. You think you can just throw us away? You think you can pretend we don't exist? We're your family, you miserable old woman. You can't just erase us. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us until I was standing inches from her face. She was taller than me, younger, stronger. But I had been facing down emergencies for 40 years. I knew how to handle a crisis. I didn't erase you, I said, my voice low and even. You erased yourselves. You told me I broke your family. You told me I was toxic. You told me I was a problem. And I believed you. So I removed the problem. She opened her mouth to shout again, but I didn't let her. I held up my hand and pointed to the security camera I had installed on the porch after our first confrontation. I'm recording this, I said. Every word, every threat, every insult. And if you don't leave my property right now, I will call the police and have you both arrested for trespassing. Diana's face went white. She looked at Mark, waiting for him to intervene, to defend her, to do something. But he just stood there, frozen, unable to meet her eyes or mine. I'm done, I said, stepping back and closing the door. I'm done with both of you. Don't call me. Don't come back. You wanted a life without me, now you have it. I closed the door and locked it, and I didn't look back. But I could still hear them arguing on the porch, Diana's shrill voice rising in fury and Mark's weak protests drifting through the wood. And I knew, in that moment, that I had made the right decision. That I walked back to the kitchen, where Elise was waiting with wide eyes. Did you just kick them out? She asked. I did, I said, sitting back down at the table. And I'm not sorry. Elise reached across the table and took my hand. You're amazing, you know that? No, I said, shaking my head. I'm not amazing. I'm just tired. I'm tired of being taken for granted. I'm tired of being the villain. I'm tired of giving and getting nothing in return. I'm finally doing something for myself. For the first time in 30 years, I'm putting myself first. Good, Elise said, squeezing my hand. It's about time. We sat there in silence for a long moment, the weight of the day settling around us like a blanket. I had done it. I had actually done it. I had cut my son and his wife out of my life. And instead of feeling guilty, I felt freed. I picked up the copy of the will and read it one more time, savoring every word. $12 million RS, and not a single penny for Mark or Diana. It was the final chapter of a story I had been telling myself for years, the story of a mother who gave everything and got nothing in return. But that story was over. A new one was just beginning. And I was ready to write myself. The morning after I kicked Mark and Diana off my porch, I woke up to a strange sensation that took me a few moments to identify. It was quiet. Not the heavy, oppressive quiet of a house waiting for an argument to resume, but a genuine, restful silence. The kind of silence that comes when a chronic noise in your life suddenly stops, and your brain takes a minute to adjust to the absence of the headache you didn't even realize you had. I lay in bed for a long time, ring at the ceiling, replaying the scene from the night before. Diana's contorted face. Mark's defeated slump. The way the door had clicked shut, final and absolute. I expected to feel a wave of regret, the familiar guilt that always followed a confrontation with my son. Instead, I felt a strange lightness, as if I had been riding a backpack full of rocks and had finally set it down. Elise had stayed the night, sleeping in her old room, and I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, the soft clink of coffee mugs and the sizzle of bacon. She was making breakfast, which was her way of coping with stress, just like her father used to do. I smiled despite myself, the first genuine smile I'd felt in weeks. I pulled on my robe and padded down the hallway, the worn floorboards RDS creaking under my feet the way they always had. The house was old, almost 60 years now, and it had settled into itself with the comfortable familiarity of an old friend. I knew every crack in the ceiling, every stubborn door that stuck in the humidity, every draft that crept through the windows in winter. This house had been my sanctuary, my refuge, the place where I had raised my children and mourned my husband. And now, for the first time in years, it felt like it was mine again. "Morning, Mom," Elise said, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon tawa RD me as I sat down at the breakfast bar. She had already poured me a cup of coffee, black with a splash of milk, just the way I liked it. "You sleep okay? Better than I have in months," I admitted, taking a sip of the coffee. It was perfect, hot, and strong, the kind of coffee that wakes you up from the inside out. "What time did you get up?" "About 6, she said, shrugging. I couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind. I studied her over the rim of my mug. Elise had always been the more observant of my two children, the one who noticed when something was off, the one who asked the hard questions. She was 38 now, divorced, with no children, and she had built a successful career as a corporate attorney in the city. She was tough, pragmatic, and fiercely loyal, but I could see the worry in her eyes, the same worry that had been there since she was a little girl watching her father get sicker and sicker. "Tell me what's bothering you," I said. "Is it the will something else?" She set down her fork and met my gaze. "All of it, honestly.
I know you're doing what you think is right.
I support you. I always have. But I'm worried about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "Mark is a lot of things," she said ruefully, "but he's also stubborn. And Diana is worse. They're not going to just walk away. They're going to fight. They're going to try to find a way to overturn that will. They're going to try to turn the rest of the family against you. They're going to make your life hell." I nodded slowly, because she was right. I had known it the moment I made the decision, had accepted it as part of the cost of my freedom. Mark had never been good at accepting defeat. Even as a child, he would argue and negotiate and wheedle until he got his way. He had Leah Renediarly that persistence paid off, especially with a mother who wanted nothing more than to see him happy. "Let them try," I said. "I've been preparing for this for months. I've got the lawyers. I've got the documentation. I've got the recording of our conversation. I'm not going to let them bully me into changing my mind." Elise reached across the counter and took my hand. "I know, Mom. I know you're prepared. But I'm not just talking about the legal stuff. I'm talking about the emotional stuff. They're going to say terrible things about you. They're going to spread lies. They're going to try to make you feel like a bad person. And I don't want you to have to go through that alone." I squeezed her hand. "I'm not alone. I have you. And honestly, I've been through worse. When your father died, I thought my world had ended. When Mark told me I was a toxic influence, I thought my heart had shattered. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I'm not going to let them knock me down." Elise smiled, a sad but determined smile. "That's my mom. The toughest woman I know." We finished breakfast in companionable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from years of read history, of knowing each other's rhythms and moods. I washed the dishes while Elise went upstairs to take a shower, and I found myself humming a song I hadn't thought of in years, an old folk tune my husband used to sing when he was in a good mood. The sound of it filled the kitchen, bouncing off the walls and filling the empty spaces with rmth. But the peace was short-lived. Around 11 in the morning, my phone root ringing. And it didn't stop. The first call was from my sister, Red, who lived in a retirement community in Arizona and rely called unless there was drama. Her voice was sharp and clipped when I answered, the tone she used when she was angry but trying to sound calm. "Eleanor," she said, using my full name the way she always did when she disapproved of something. "I just got off the phone with Diana. She told me some very disturbing things." "Did she now?" I said flatly. "Let me guess. She told you I cut them out of the will. She told you I'm a bitter old woman who's punishing her son for no reason. She told you I'm losing my mind." There was a pause on Mark's end. "Well," She didn't use those exact words, but yes. That's the gist of it. Eleanor, what's going on? This doesn't sound like you. I leaned against the counter, my free hand gripping the edge of the granite. My sister and I had never been close, not really. She was 5 years older, and we had grown up in different worlds. Her the golden child who could do no wrong, me the scrappy younger sister who had to fight for everything. When our parents died, we had drifted even further apart, only reconnecting for the occasional holiday card or funeral. It sounds exactly like me, I said. Or rather, it sounds like the me I should have been all along. The me who stops letting people walk all over her. Eleanor, he's your son, Margaret said, her voice softening. I know he's not perfect. I know Diana can be difficult. But you can't just disinherit him. It's not right. It's not Christian. Don't talk to me about what's Christian, I said, my voice rising for the first time. He told me I broke his family. He told me I was toxic. He agreed with his wife when she said I was a problem. And then he asked me for $50,000 RS for a wedding. A wedding, Margaret. While I was sitting in a house with a broken furnace and a leaking roof. He didn't read about me. He only read about my money. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Margaret was silent for a long moment, and I could almost hear her processing, the hairs turning as she tried to reconcile the image of her nephew with the story I was telling. He said that, she asked finally, her voice small. He said it. I confirmed. And he meant it. I could see it in his eyes. He's been thinking it for years. He just finally said it out loud. Margaret sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul. I didn't know. He always seemed so, I don't know, so grateful to you, so appreciative. Appreciative, I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. He's appreciative when I write a check. He's appreciative when I buy him a car. He's appreciative when I co-sign a loan. But when it comes to me, the person, the mother who raised him, he couldn't less. I'm a means to an end. And I'm done being that. I understand, Margaret said slowly. I think I need some time to process this. But Eleanor, you have to understand this is going to cause a lot of problems. The rest of the family is going to take sides. They're going to ask questions. They're going to demand answers. Let them, I said. I've got nothing to hide, and I've got all the receipts. We talked for a few more minutes, the conversation trailing off into uncomfortable small talk before we finally hung up. I set the phone down on the counter and read at it, waiting for the next call, the next accusation, the next wave of pressure from a family that had never really understood me. It came 20 minutes later, this time from my cousin Robert, who lived in Florida and who I hadn't spoken to in years. He was more direct than Margaret, less diplomatic, and he didn't bother hiding his anger. What the hell, Eleanor, he barked. I just heard what you did to Mark. You can't do that. He's your son. He's the only son you have. You're destroying the family. I'm not destroying anything, I said, my voice calm and measured. I'm protecting myself. And if you don't like it, you can feel free to stay out of it. Stay out of it, he sputtered. This is my family. Mark is my nephew. I have a right to weigh in. You have a right to an opinion. I corrected him. But that's all it is. An opinion. It doesn't change the facts. It doesn't change what he said to me. And it doesn't change my decision. He tried to argue, but I cut him off, using the same tone I used to use with difficult patients in the ER. Firm. Unyielding. The kind of tone that brooked no argument. When he realized he wasn't getting anywhere, he hung up in a huff, promising to call me back when I had come to my senses. That I didn't wait for the next call. I turned off my phone and set it in a drawer, where I couldn't hear it ringing. The silence that followed was a relief, a respite from the rage of accusations and guilt-tripping that had become my morning. Elise came downstairs a few minutes later, her hair still damp from the shower, and she found me sitting in the living room with a book in my lap. I wasn't reading it. I was just staring at the pages, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. Rough morning, she asked, sitting down beside me. You could say that, I admitted. Marga called. Robert called. I'm sure the rest of the family is next. They're all going to tell me I'm wrong. They're all going to try to make me change my mind. Are you going to? She asked. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw the same fierce determination in her eyes that I felt in my own heart.
She was on my side.
She had always been on my side. And that was enough to— No, I said. I'm not going to change my mind. They don't get to decide what's right for me.
Ido.
Elise nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth.
Good.
Because I've been thinking about what you said, about the will. And I have an idea. What kind of idea? She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You said you're donating a lot of it. To the hospital. To the scholarship fund. That's great. But what about the rest? What about the money that isn't EARMARKED? I frowned. What about it? Well, she said slowly, what if you use some of it to do something for yourself, something you've always wanted to do, but never had the chance? You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's time to take care of yourself. The suggestion hung in the air, unexpected and surprisingly appealing. I had never really thought about what I wanted. I had always been so focused on providing for my children, on building a secure future for them, that I had forgotten to build one for myself. I had saved and scrimped and invested, but it had all been for them. For the legacy I would leave behind. For the inheritance that would make their lives easier. But now that legacy was gone, at least for Mark. And I was left with a fortune and no one to give it to. What would I even do? I asked, shaking my head. I'm 72 years old. I've got a bad knee and a creaky back. I can't exactly go skydiving.
Not that, Elise laughed.
But something. A trip. A new hobby. A renovation. Something that makes you happy. You've spent your whole life being practical. Maybe it's time to be a little impractical. I thought about it.
Really thought about it.
And for the first time in decades, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't about sacrifice and obligation. A future where I wasn't the care taker, the provider, the safety net. A future where I was just me. Okay, I said slowly. I'll think about it. Good, Elise said, squeezing my hand. That's all I ask. The rest of the day passed in relative peace. I didn't turn my phone back on, and Elise respected my decision to unplug. We spent the afternoon going through old photo albums, reminiscing about the past, laughing at the terrible haircuts and unfashionable clothes. It was a good day. A simple day. The kind of day I hadn't had in years. But as the sun began to set and the shadows lengthened across the living room floor, I felt a familiar tension creeping back into my shoulders. I was bracing for the next blow, the next confrontation, the next attempt to break me down. It wasn't a matter of if. It was a matter of when. Dinner was quiet, a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables that Elise had prepared while I set the table. We ate in the dining room, the same room where I had hosted so many family dinners over the years, and I found myself looking at the empty chairs with a pang of melancholy. Mark's chair. Diana's chair. My late husband's chair. All empty. All waiting for people who would never sit in them again. Are you okay? Elise asked, noticing my gaze. I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just thinking. About what? I hesitated, not sure how to put my feelings into words. About how quickly things change. One day you're a mother with a full house and a full life. The next day you're alone. Staring at empty chairs, wondering where all the time went. Elise reached across the table and took my hand. You're not alone, Mom. You have me. And you have yourself. That's enough. I nodded, blinking back the tears that were threatening to spill. I know. It's just hard sometimes. We finished dinner in silence, the weight of the day settling around us like a familiar blanket. I read the dishes while Elise poured 2 glasses of wine, and we retired to the living room to watch the evening news. It was a small ritual, a quiet comfort, but it felt monumental after everything that had happened. Around 9 o'clock, a knock came at the door that Elise and I exchanged a look. We weren't expecting anyone. The neighbors knew better than to disturb us this late. And Mark and Diana had been told to stay away. I'll get it, Elise said, rising from her chair. You stay here. I watched her walk to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see her hesitate for a moment, peering through the peephole, and then she opened the door with a sigh of resignation. Standing on the porch was Mark's childhood friend, Charlie. Charlie was a big, lumbering man with a kind face and a nervous smile, and he had been Mark's best friend since elementary school. He had spent more time in my house than Mark had, eating my food, sleeping on my couch, getting into trouble with my son. I had always liked Charlie. He was a good kid, respectful and honest, the kind of friend every parent wanted their child to have. Hey, Mrs. MCCA, he said, shuffling his feet. I know it's late. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to talk to you about Mark. I stood up and walked to the door, motioning for him to come inside. It's okay, Charlie.
Come in.
Have a seat. He followed me into the living room, his eyes darting around the familiar space with a mix of nostalgia and unease. He sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped between his knees, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What's going on? I asked, sitting across from him. Is Mark okay? Charlie sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I don't know how to say this, Mrs. MCCA, RTHY. Mark came to my house last night. He was a mess.
Crying.
Pacing. Saying things that didn't make sense. What kind of things? Things about the will. Charlie said ruefully. Things about Diana. Things about you. He's not in a good place, Mrs. MCCA, RTHY. He's SCA red.
He's lost.
And I think he's STA, rooting to realize that he made a terrible mistake. I leaned forward, studying Charlie's face. He wasn't here to deliver a message from Mark. Mark didn't even know he was here. Charlie had come on his own, driven by a loyalty that had survived decades of friendship. What do you want me to do? I asked. Charlie shrugged. I don't know. I just thought you should know. I thought maybe you could reach out to him.
Just to talk.
Just to let him know you're not giving up on him. I sat back in my chair, the weight of his words settling on my shoulders. Charlie was a good man. He meant well, but he didn't understand. He didn't know what Mark had said to me, the cruelty of his words, the cold indifference in his eyes. He didn't know that I had already given Mark a chance, and Mark had thrown it away. Charlie, I said quietly, I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate your loyalty to Mark, but I can't reach out to him.
Not right now.
I need time. And Mark needs time. Time to figure out what he actually wants, and whether he's willing to in it. Charlie nodded slowly, his expression sad but accepting. I understand, Mrs. MCCA, RTHY. I really do. I hate seeing him like this. He's not a bad person. He's just lost. And I think he's afraid of admitting that he's wrong. I know, I said. I know he's not a bad person. But that doesn't mean I have to let him hurt me. Love isn't a free pass, Charlie. It's a choice. And Mark chose not to love me the way I needed to be loved. We talked for a few more minutes, the conversation trailing off into the kind of awkward silence that comes when two people have said everything they need to say. When Charlie finally left, I stood in the doorway and watched him walk down the driveway, his shoulders hunched and his head bowed. I closed the door and leaned against it, the wood seal against my back. Elise was standing in the living room, watching me with a worried expression. You okay? She asked. I will be, I said. I will be. But as I walked back to my chair and sat down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that the storm was just beginning, and that whatever came next would test me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The phone call came at 3 a.m, a time when nothing good ever happens. I had been sleeping fitfully, my dreams a jumble of old memories and new anxieties, when the shrill ring of the landline jerked me awake. I fumbled for the receiver in the dark, my heart already racing, because a call at this hour meant only one thing. Someone was in trouble. Someone was hurt. Someone was gone. Mrs. MCCA, RTHY. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, professional but urgent. This is St. Mary's Hospital. We have your son, MARK MCCA here. He's been in an accident. The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath out of my lungs. I clutched the phone with both hands, my knuckles white against the plastic. Is he okay? What happened? Is he going to be all right? He's stable, the voice said, but he's sustained some injuries. He was brought in by ambulance about an hour ago.
He's asking for you.
I was already out of bed, fumbling for my robe, my mind racing through 1,000 scenarios.
Caer accident.
HERT attack. Something worse. I had spent 40 years in hospitals, had seen every kind of trauma and tragedy, but nothing had prepared me for the terror of hearing that my child was the patient. I'll be there as soon as I can, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. Please tell him I'm coming. Tell him I'm on my way. I hung up and stood in the darkness of my bedroom, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The house was silent, but I could hear Elise moving in the room next door, awakened by the sound of my voice. She read in my doorway a moment later, her hair tousled and her eyes wide with concern. Mom, what happened? Who is it? It's MARK, I said, my voice cracking. He's in the hospital. He's been in an accident. I have to go. I'm coming with you, Elise said, already pulling on a jacket. I'll drive. You're in no state to be behind the wheel. I didn't argue. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so badly I could rely button my coat. I grabbed my purse and my keys, and we were out the door in less than 5 minutes, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. The drive to the hospital was a blur of streetlights and silence. Elise focused on the road, her jaw set with determination, while I read out the window and tried to steady my breathing. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what had happened. MARK had been fine 2 days ago, angry and defiant, but fine. What could have happened? What could have gone so wrong? I thought about the last time I had seen him, standing on my porch with Diana, his face pale and defeated. I thought about the things he had said, the things he had let her say, the way he had looked at me like I was a stranger. And I thought about all the years before that, all the dinners and holidays and quiet moments that had built the foundation of our relationship. Had it all been a lie? Had he ever really loved me? Or had I just been a convenience? The hospital loomed in front of us, a giant monolith of concrete and glass that glowed against the dark sky. We parked in the emergency lot and hurried inside, the automatic doors sliding open to reveal the hot RSH fluorescent light and the antiseptic smell that I had known for most of my adult life. The waiting room was quiet, filled with a few tired-looking people who were ring at their phones, or the muted television in the corner. I approached the front desk, my heart hammering in my chest.
I'm Eleanor MCCA.
My son, MARK MCCA, was brought in.
I was told he's asking for me.
The nurse at the desk, a young woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, looked up from her computer and nodded. Yes, Mrs. MCCA. He's in room 214. He's been asking for you since he arrived. I'll take you up. She led us through a maze of corridors, past nurses' stations and patient rooms, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I could feel Elise's hand on my arm, steadying me, grounding me. I was grateful for her presence, her strength, her unwavering support. The nurse stopped outside a door and turned to face me. He's stable, but he's been through a lot. He's got a broken arm, a few cracked ribs, and a concussion. He was lucky. It could have been a lot worse. What happened? I asked, my voice rely above a whisper. He lost control of his car on the highway, she said gently. He swerved to avoid another vehicle and hit the guardrail. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. That's why the injuries as severe as they are. I closed my eyes, the image of my son crashing into a guardrail flashing through my mind. The thought of him alone, read, injured, was almost too much to bear. I had spent so much of the last few months being angry at him, so much time feeling betrayed and hurt, that I had forgotten how much I still loved him. How much I would always love him, no matter what he had said or done. Can I see him? I asked. The nurse nodded.
He's awake.
He's been asking for you. But I should RN you. He's on a lot of pain medication. He might not make a lot of sense. I pushed open the door and stepped into the room. The lights were dim, the only illumination coming from the monitors beside the bed. Mark was lying there, pale and bruised, his arm in a cast and his head wrapped in bandages. He looked so small, so fragile, so much like the little boy I used to tuck in a bed at night. Mark, I said softly, crossing the room to his bedside. I'm here, honey. His eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. Mom, his voice was hoa ars, a whisper. I didn't think you'd come. Of course I came, I said, taking his hand. You're my son. Nothing could keep me away. He squeezed my hand weakly, tears spilling down his cheeks. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking.
I'm so sorry, Mom.
I'm so sorry for everything. I sat down in the chair beside his bed, still holding his hand, my own tears now flowing freely. It's okay, I said. It's okay, Mark. We can talk about all of that later. Right now, you just need to rest. No, he insisted, shaking his head despite the obvious pain it caused him. I need to say this. I need you to hear me. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Everything I said to you, everything Diana said, it was all wrong. You didn't break our family. I did. I broke it when I stopped seeing you as my mother and sta root seeing you as a bank account. I squeezed his hand tighter, my throat too tight to speak. I had waited so long to hear these words, had longed for them with every fiber of my being. And now that they were here, they were almost too much to process. She's been poisoning me against you for yours, Mark continued, his voice raw and broken. I didn't even realize it.
She was so subtle about it.
A comment here, a complaint there. She made me believe that you were the problem, that you were holding us back, that you didn't really love me. And I believed her. I believed her, because it was easier than admitting the truth. What truth? I asked, my voice rely above a whisper. The truth that I was failing, he said, tears streaming down his face. The truth that I couldn't provide for my family, that I was in over my head, that I was SCA red. She made me believe that your money would fix everything, that if I could just get my hands on it, all my problems would disappear. And I bought into it. I bought into it because I was weak. I sat there in the dim light of the hospital room, holding my son's hand, listening to him pour out his heart. It was a confession, a catharsis, a reckoning. And as I listened, I felt the anger and hurt that had been festering inside me begin to loosen, to give way to something softer. Something that felt a lot like forgiveness. Where's Diana? I asked, looking around the room. Did she come with you? Mark's face tightened, a flicker of anger crossing his features. She didn't come. She was in the passenger seat when I crashed. She wasn't hurt, just shaken. But she didn't stay. She had her mother pick her up. She said she couldn't deal with the stress. I felt a surge of anger at Diana, at her selfishness, her callousness. Her husband was in the hospital, injured and SCA red, and she had abandoned him. She had chosen her own comfort over his need for support. It was the final confirmation of everything I had suspected about her, the final piece of evidence that she was not the right person for my son. She left you? I asked, my voice RP with disbelief. She left me? Mark confirmed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. She said I was too emotional, too needy. She said she needed some space.
Can you believe that?
After everything I've done for her, after everything I've given her, she couldn't even stay by my side for one night. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. There was so much I wanted to say, so much anger and frustration and pain that I wanted to unleash. But I knew that now wasn't the time. Now was the time to be strong, to be supportive, to be the mother that Mark needed me to be. We'll figure this out, I said, squeezing his hand. One step at a time. But right now, you need to rest. You need to heal. Everything else can wait. Mom, he said, his eyes sea-urching mine, Do you think you can ever forgive me for everything I said, for everything I did? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw the boy I had raised, the man he had become, and the person he was trying to be. He was broken, yes. He had made terrible mistakes. But he was also remorseful, vulnerable, and willing to change. I already have, I said softly. I forgave you the moment I walked through that door. He sta root to cry again, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. I leaned four-way RD and wrapped my arms around him, a refill not to hurt his injured ribs, and I held him the way I used to hold him when he was a child. I held him until his sobs quieted, until his breathing steadied, until he fell asleep in my arms. Elise Ape read in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed. She had been listening, I realized. She had heard everything. And she had been waiting, giving us space, letting us have this moment. How is he? She asked, her voice soft. He's going to be okay, I said, gently releasing Mark's hand and standing up. He's going to be okay. We walked out of the room together, leaving Mark to rest. The hallway was quiet, the only sound the distant beeping of monitors and the soft shuffle of nurses' footsteps. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, the exhaustion of the night finally catching up with me. Mom, Elise said, her voice hesitant. What are we going to do about Diana? I opened my eyes and looked at my daughter, my fierce, loyal daughter who had always been on my side. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know one thing. She's not going to get away with this. She abandoned my son when he needed her most. And I'm not going to let that go. We can deal with her later, Elise said, putting her arm around me. Right now, you need to rest. You've been running on adrenaline all night. She was right. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. But I couldn't rest. Not yet. There was still so much to do, so much to figure out. The next morning, Mark was transferred to a regular room. His injuries were serious but not life-threatening, and the doctors were optimistic about his recovery. I stayed by his side throughout the day, dozing in the chair beside his bed, waking up every time he stirred. Elise brought me coffee and sandwiches, and she ran interference with the nurses and doctors, making sure I didn't have to worry about anything but Mark. Around noon, Diana showed up. She walked into the room like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor, her designer bag slung over her shoulder. She looked perfect, as always, her hair styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like she was headed to a luncheon, not visiting her injured husband. Mark baby, she said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. I'm so sorry I couldn't come last night. It was all so overwhelming. I just needed to clear my head. I watched her from my chair, my blood boiling. She was lying. I could see it in her eyes, the casual way she dismissed her absence, the performance she was putting on for my benefit. Clear your head, Mark repeated, his voice flat. While I was lying in a hospital bed with a broken arm and cracked ribs, you needed to clear your head. Diana's smile faltered, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. Mark, don't be like that. You know I love you. I was just SCA red. I didn't know how to handle it. You left me, he said, his voice rising. You left me in a hospital room alone and you went home. You didn't call. You didn't text. You just sape red. I needed some space, she said defensively. You were being so dramatic, so demanding. I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stood up from my chair and faced her, my eyes blazing with fury. You couldn't deal with it. Your husband was in a car accident. He was injured. He was SCA red. And you couldn't deal with it. This doesn't concern you. Diana snapped, turning on me. This is between me and Mark. Everything concerns me, I said, my voice cold and harrowed. I'm his mother. And I'm not going to stand by and watch you manipulate him and destroy him and walk away whenever things get harrowed. Diana laughed, a brittle sound. You're his mother. You're the one who cut him out of the will. You're the one who humiliated him in front of the whole family. You're the one who made him feel worthless. I made him feel worthless, I repeated, incredulous. I made him feel worthless. You're the one who poisoned him against me. You're the one who made him believe I was the enemy. You're the one who used him and manipulated him and turned him into a person recognize. Mom. Mark said, his voice weary. Please. Just stop. Both of you. I turned to look at him, and I saw the exhaustion on his face, the pain in his eyes. He couldn't handle this.
Not now.
Not like this. I took a deep breath and stepped back. You're right. This isn't the time or the place. I looked at Diana, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Diana read at me, her eyes filled with hatred. But she didn't say anything. She turned to Mark, her expression softening into one of practiced concern. I'm going to go get some coffee, she said. I'll be back in a few minutes. She walked out of the room, leaving me alone with Mark. The silence was heavy, thick with everything that had been said and everything that hadn't been. She's not going to change, Mark said quietly, ring at the ceiling. I know that now. She's never going to change. Then what are you going to do? I asked. He was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to look at me, his eyes filled with a resolve I hadn't seen in years. I'm going to leave her, he said. I'm going to divorce her. I can't do this anymore. I can't live my life being controlled and manipulated and used. I sat down on the edge of his bed and took his hand. Are you sure this is a big decision, Mark? You need to be certain. I've never been more certain of anything, he said. I'm tired, Mom. I'm so tired. I've been fighting a war I didn't even know I was in, and I'm losing. I don't want to fight anymore. I just want to be free. I squeezed his hand, my heart breaking for him. He had been through so much, had made so many mistakes. But he was finally choosing to stand up for himself, finally choosing to take control of his own life. Whatever you decide, I said, I'll support you. I'll always support you. He smiled, a fragile, broken smile. I know, Mom. I know. The divorce papers arrived at my house 3 weeks after Mark got out of the hospital. I wasn't expecting them, and for a moment, I read at the envelope in my hands like it was a live grenade. Mark had told me he was leaving Diana, had said it with such conviction in that hospital room, but a part of me had been waiting for him to waver.
To cave.
To go back to the familiar misery of a marriage that had been slowly suffocating him for years. But here was the proof. Here was the evidence that my son had finally, after all this time, decided to fight for himself. I called him immediately, my hands trembling with a mixture of anxiety and pride. Mark, I got the papers. Are you sure about this? His voice on the other end was tired but steady. I've never been more sure about anything, Mom. I should have done this years ago. I should have seen her for who she was the first time she made me choose between you and her. I sat down in my room chair, the papers still clutched in my hand. What happened? What finally pushed you over the edge? He was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear him gathering his thoughts. It was the accident, he said finally. Not the accident itself, but what happened after. She left me, Mom. She left me in that hospital room, and she didn't come back until the next day, and even then, it was only because she realized it would look bad if she didn't. She didn't read about me. She never read about me. She only read about what I could give her. I closed my eyes, the anger rising in my chest like a familiar tide. I had known Diana was manipulative, had known she was using my son, but Mark say it out loud. The pain in his voice, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. She's been calling me nonstop, Mark continued. Leaving voicemails, sending texts, crying and screaming and threatening. She's telling me I'll never see my friends again. She's telling me she'll take everything I have. She's telling me she'll make sure everyone knows what a monster I am. Let her try, I said, my voice harrowed. She doesn't have a leg to stand on and she knows it. You have witnesses. You have evidence. You have me. He laughed, a soft, rueful sound. Yeah, I have you. I don't deserve you, Mom. I don't deserve any of this. Stop that, I said firmly. You're my son. You deserve everything. and we're going to get through this together. One step at a time. The next few weeks were a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and emotional upheaval. Mark moved out of the house he and Diana had shared, crashing on Charlie's couch while he looked for an APA rent of his own. Diana, true to form, made the process as difficult as possible. She contested every provision of the divorce. She dragged her feet on signing documents. She called Mark's workplace and tried to damage his reputation, spreading lies about him being unstable and abusive.
It was exhausting.
It was infuriating. But through it all, Mark held steady. He went to therapy twice a week. He route running in the mornings, something he hadn't done since college. He called me every night, not to ask for money or favors, but just to talk. Just to hear my voice. It was a small thing, that nightly phone call. But it meant more to me than any check I had ever written. That one evening in late October, Mark came to my house for dinner. It was the first time he had visited since the hospital, and I was nervous in a way I hadn't been in years. I spent the whole afternoon Seagull King, making all his favorites, the comfort foods I used to make when he was a boy. Roast chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes with butter and cream, green beans with bacon. And for dessert, his grandmother's apple pie. The recipe I had arrived like a family heirloom. He arrived at 6, right on time, and I opened the door to find him standing on my porch with a bottle of wine and a tentative smile. He looked better than he had in months, healthier and more present, the shadows under his eyes finally rooting to fade. "You look good," I said, pulling him into a hug. "Really good." "Thanks, Mom," he said, hugging me back. It's amazing what a little sleep and a lot of therapy can do. We sat down to dinner at the same table where we had had our fateful conversation months ago, but the atmosphere was completely different. There was no tension, no resentment, no unspoken accusations. Just two people sharing a meal, reconnecting, rebuilding. Elise told me she's coming home for Thanksgiving. Mark said, passing me the potatoes. She said she wants us all to be together. She does, I confirmed. I think she's worried about us. Worried that we're going to fall apart without her to hold us together.
Maerika palaft.
Elise has always been the glue. Remember when she was 12 and she organized a family meeting because we were all fighting too much? I smiled, the memory washing over me. I remember. She made a PowerPoint presentation, complete with graphs. She was terrifying, Mark said, shaking his head. I was red of her for years after that. We laughed together, the sound filling the kitchen, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Felt right. Felt like the way things used to be before the money and the resentment and the lies, but I knew we couldn't avoid the hot-arty topics forever. And after we finished our apple pie and moved to the living room with our coffee, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. Mark, I said ruefully, I need to talk to you about something. Something important. He set down his coffee cup, his expression turning serious. What is it, Mom? I've been thinking a lot about the will, I said. About the decision I made. And I want you to know that I stand by it. Not because I don't love you, but because I needed to make a point. I needed you to understand that I am not a source of endless money. I am not a safety net. I am your mother, and I deserve to be treated with respect. Mark nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on his coffee cup. I know, Mom. I understand. And I don't blame you. I don't blame you for any of it. But here's the thing, I continued. I'm not going to leave you with nothing. That was never my intention. I was angry. I was hurt. And I wanted to make you feel what I was feeling. But I've had time to think about it. A lot of time. He looked up at me, his eyes sea-urching mine. What are you saying? I'm saying that I'm going to change the will, I said. Not to give you everything back. Not to make you think you can go back to the way things were. But to make sure that you're taken care of. That you have a safety net, even if it's not the one you expected. He route to protest, but I held up my hand to stop him. Let me finish, I said. I'm not giving you a cash inheritance. You're not getting a lump sum that you can blow on cars or vacations or whatever. What I'm doing is setting up a trust. A trust that will pay out a modest monthly income for the rest of your life. Enough to cover your basic needs. Enough to give you peace of mind. But not enough to let you be reckless. Marksta read at me, his mouth hanging open. Mom, I don't know what to say. I don't deserve this. After everything I did. You deserve a second chance, I interrupted him. Everyone deserves a second chance. And this is yours. What you do with it is up to you. He was quiet for a long moment, processing what I had just told him. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the calculations and considerations, and Fia RS. And then, slowly, he root to smiled. Thank you, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for not giving up on me. I never gave up on you, I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. I never could. You're my son. That's not something you can just switch off. He squeezed my hand back, and for a long moment, we just sat there in comfortable silence, the weight of the past few months finally rooting to lift. But as I would soon Leah Aron, the past has a way of refusing to stay buried. The next morning, I got a call from my attorney, a RP, no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who had been handling my legal affairs for the better part of a decade. Her voice was tense when she spoke, the kind of tension that made my stomach drop. Eleanor, we have a problem. Diana is contesting the divorce. She's claiming that Mark was coerced into filing, that he wasn't in his right mind when he made the decision. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. That's ridiculous. Mark is perfectly sound of mind.
He's been in therapy.
He's been thinking about this for months. I know, Patricia said. I know it's ridiculous. But she's got a lawyer who's willing to go along with it. They're claiming that the accident caused a traumatic brain injury, that Mark is incapable of making rational decisions. My hand tightened around the phone. She's lying. There's no evidence of any brain injury. The doctors read him before he left the hospital. Lying is what she does best, Patricia said dryly. The point is, this is going to drag out the divorce. It's going to cost Mark time and money. And it's going to give Diana more opportunities to hurt him. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. What can we do? Fight back, Patricia said. We have the medical records. We have witnesses. We have documentation of her behavior. But we need to be strategic. We need to be prepared for everything she throws at us. Then we'll be prepared, I said, my voice harrowed. I've been dealing with Diana's manipulations for years. I'm not going to let her win now. We talked for a few more minutes, going over the details, planning our strategy. By the time I hung up, my blood was boiling. Diana was trying to destroy my son, and she was using every tool in her arsenal to do it. I called Mark immediately. We need to talk. Diana is contesting the divorce. There was a long pause on his end. I knew she would, he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. She's not going to let me go easily. She's going to make me pay for every minute of freedom. Let her try, I said. She's not going to win. We're going to fight her, and we're going to win. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, I don't know if I have the energy to fight her. I'm so tired. I've been fighting her for years. I don't know if I have anything left. Then let me fight for you, I said. Let me CARRY some of the weight. That's what mothers do. We CARRY the weight, so our children can rest. He was quiet again, and I could hear the emotion in his breathing, the struggle to keep himself together. I love you, Mom, he said finally. I love you so much. I love you too, Mark, I said. And we're going to get through this. I promise. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Diana threw everything she had at Mark, accusations and manipulations and outright lies. She called his friends and told them he was unstable. She called his boss and tried to get him fired. She called me, screaming obscenities, threatening to ruin my life. But I had been on the front lines of emotional warfare before, and I refused to back down. I had my attorney file countersuits. I had Mark's therapist provide testimony. I had the hospital records reviewed and certified. I built a wall of evidence so thick that Diana's lies couldn't penetrate it. And slowly, painfully, we STA route to win. The court ordered Diana to stop contacting Mark except through her attorney. The claims of coercion and incompetence were dismissed for lack of evidence. The divorce was finally, officially on track to be finalized. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. The cost had been immense, emotionally and financially. Mark had lost friends who believed Diana's lies. He had lost months of his life to stress and anxiety. He had lost a version of himself that he would never get back. But he had gained something too. He had gained CLA righty. He had gained freedom. And he had gained a relationship with me that was stronger than it had ever been. One evening, after the dust had finally STA route to settle, Mark came to my house for dinner again. It had become a ritual, a weekly touchstone, a way for us to stay connected in the middle of the chaos. You know, he said, pushing his empty plate away, I used to think that money was the most important thing. I thought if I had enough money, everything else would fall into place. I thought I could buy happiness, buy security, buy love. And I was so wrong. I smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. It took me a long time to learn that lesson too. I spent my whole life working and saving, thinking that money would protect me from everything.
And it didn't.
It just made me more afraid of losing it. At least we rented it together, he said, smiling back. That's something. It's everything, I said. It's everything. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in November, the kind of day that felt like the world was holding its breath. I sat in the back of the courtroom, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, watching my son stand before the judge and officially sever the last tie to the woman who had made his life a living hell. Diana wasn't there. She had sent her attorney, a slick, fast-talking man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mark stood alone, his shoulders straight, his chin lifted, and I had never been prouder of him. When the judge banged his gavel and Dil Claim read the mariage dissolved, Mark turned to look at me. His eyes were wet, but he was smiling. It was the smile of a man who had just been released from a prison he hadn't even realized he was in. I stood up and walked toward him, and he met me halfway, pulling me into a hug that was both a celebration and a surrender. It's over, he whispered into my ear. It's finally over. It's over, I repeated, holding him tight. And now you can start living. We went out for lunch afterward, just the two of us, at a small diner near the courthouse that Mark used to love when he was a kid. The place hadn't changed much in 30 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same faded photos of local celebrities on the walls, same smell of grease and coffee that somehow felt like home. We ordered burgers and milkshakes, and we talked about everything and nothing. So what's next? I asked, dipping a fry in ketchup. What do you want to do with your freedom? Mark shrugged, a tentative, almost shy gesture. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. I've been so focused on getting out of the mariage that I didn't really plan for what comes after. That's okay, I said. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take it one day at a time. He nodded, ring at his milkshake like it held the secrets of the universe. I was thinking about maybe taking a trip. Just a short one. I haven't been anywhere in years. Diana always wanted to go to these fancy resorts, places where you're expected to dress for dinner and spend a fortune on spa treatments. I want to go somewhere simple. Somewhere quiet. That sounds perfect, I said. Where were you thinking? I don't know yet, he admitted. Maybe the mountains. Maybe the coast. Somewhere I can just breathe. I smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. You take all the time you need. You've rented it. He squeezed my hand back, and for a moment, everything felt right. Felt hopeful. Felt like the beginning of something new. But I should have known that Diana wasn't done with us. She was never done. She was like a rash that kept coming back, no matter how much ointment you applied. The first sign of trouble came a week later, when I received a certified letter in the mail. I opened it with a sense of dread, already knowing it was from Diana's attorney. The contents confirmed my worst fears. Diana was suing me for emotional distress. She was claiming that I had intentionally interfered with her mariage, that I had manipulated Mark into divorcing her, that I had caused her irreparable harm. The letter was dripping with legal jargon, but the message was clear. Diana wanted revenge. She wanted to hurt me the way she had been hurt, and she was willing to use the legal system to do it. I called Patricia immediately, my hands shaking with anger. Patricia, it's Eleanor. I just got a letter from Diana's attorney. She's suing me. There was a long pause on the other end. I was afraid of this, Patricia said. Diana's attorney is known for filing frivolous lawsuits. It's a tactic.
She's trying to intimidate you.
She's trying to make you back down. She's not going to intimidate me, I said, my voice harrowed. What do? We fight, Patricia said. We file a motion to dismiss. We cite the evidence. We make it clear that her claims have no basis in reality. But Eleanor, I need to warn you. This is going to be ugly. She's going to drag your name through the mud. She's going to make accusations that are going to hurt. I don't see I said. I've been through worse. I've been a nurse for 40 years. I've had patients accuse me of things I didn't do. I've been threatened and yelled at and blamed for things that weren't my fault. I can handle Diana. Patricia sighed. All right. I'll start working on the motion. But I need you to prepare yourself. This is going to take time. It's going to take money. And it's going to take a toll on you emotionally. I'm ready, I said. I've been ready for a long time. The lawsuit became a shadow that followed me everywhere. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. It was there when I woke up in the morning, when I went to the grocery store, when I sat in my living room trying to read a book. It was a weight on my chest, a constant reminder that Diana was still out there, still trying to destroy me. But I refused to let her win. I refused to let her steal my peace. I went about my life as normally as I could, going to my weekly bridge game, volunteering at the hospital, having dinner with Mark and Elise. I smiled when I didn't feel like smiling. I laughed when I didn't feel like laughing. I pretended that everything was fine, even when it wasn't, and then one night, everything fell apart. It was a Thursday, late, around 10 o'clock. I was in my pajamas, getting ready for bed, when I heard a crash from the front of the house. It sounded like glass breaking, sharp and violent. My heart leaped into my throat, and I froze, listening. There was silence for a moment, and then I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving through my living room. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the bedroom door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I peered around the corner and saw a figure moving in the darkness, tall and slender, silhouetted against the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. I knew that silhouette. I would have recognized it anywhere. Diana, I said, my voice sharp and steady despite my fear. What are you doing in my house? She turned to face me, and I could see her face clearly now, twisted with rage and grief. She was holding a hammer, the kind you use to hang pictures, and she was breathing heavily, her eyes wild and unfocused. You ruined my life, she hissed. You took everything from me, my husband, my home, my future. And now I'm going to take everything from you. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. Diana, put the hammer down.
We can talk about this.
We can work this out. I don't want to talk, she screamed, taking a step toward me. I want you to feel what I felt. I want you to hurt the way I hurt. I had faced dangerous patients before, people who were out of their minds with pain and fear. I knew the signs. I knew that reasoning with her wouldn't work. I needed to stay calm. I needed to keep her talking until I could find a way out. Tell me what happened, Diana, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. Tell me why you're so angry. She laughed, a brittle, broken sound. Why am I angry? You destroyed my marriage. You turned Mark against me. You took away the only person who ever loved me. Mark loved you, I said softly. He loved you with everything he had. But you pushed him away. You manipulated him and used him and made him feel like he was never good enough. He couldn't take it anymore. That's a lie, she spat. I loved him. I did everything for him. And he threw it all away because you poisoned him against me. I shook my head slowly. I didn't poison him. I just told him the truth. And the truth is, Diana, that you never loved Mark. You loved what he could give you. You loved the money, the status, the security. But you didn't love him. If you had, you would have been there for him when he needed you. You would have been by his side in the hospital. You wouldn't have abandoned him when he was at his lowest. She was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. You don't know anything. You don't know what it's like to feel like you're drowning and no one sees. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. I know exactly what it's like, I said, my voice rely above a whisper. I lost my husband when I was 42. I lost my sister to cancer. I lost my son to you. I know what it's like to feel like the world is collapsing around you. And I know that destroying someone else's life doesn't fix your own. Diana read at me, the hammer still raised, her chest heaving. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the war between her rage and her pain. She was a woman who had been broken, who had been beaten down, who had never learned how to heal. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt pity. I'm not your enemy, Diana, I said gently. I never was. I was just a mother trying to protect her son. And if that made me your enemy, then so be it. But I don't hate you. I never hated you. I just wanted what was best for Mark. She lowered the hammer, just a fraction. What was best for Mark, she repeated, her voice hollow. He was happy with me. We were happy. Were you? I asked. Were you really happy, or were you just pretending? The question hung in the air between us, heavy and unanswerable. Diana read at me, and I could see the cracks forming in her facade, the walls she had built around herself rooting to crumble. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know anything anymore. She dropped the hammer. It clattered against the floor, and she sank to her knees, sobbing. I walked over to her, slowly, carefully, and knelt beside her. I put my hand on her shoulder and she flinched, but she didn't pull away. It's okay, I said softly. It's going to be okay. I'm so tired, she said, her voice breaking. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of being angry. I just want it to stop. I sat there with her on the floor of my living room, holding her while she cried. She was the woman who had tried to destroy my family, who had manipulated my son, who had filed a lawsuit against me. But in that moment, she was just a broken human being, desperate and red and alone. I'm going to call the police, I said gently. They're going to come, and they're going to ask you questions. You need to be honest with them, Diana. You need to tell them the truth. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I know. I'll tell them everything. I don't see anymore. I just want it to be over. I called the police, and they arrived within minutes. They took Diana into custody, gentle but firm, and I gave them my statement. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, ring at the broken glass and the forgotten hammer. My hands were shaking, my heart still racing. I had just survived a confrontation that could have gone very differently. And yet, instead of feeling afraid, I felt relieved. The next morning, I called Mark. I told him what had happened, and he was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry she did that to you. I should have been there. I should have protected you. Don't be silly, I said. You couldn't have known. And besides, it's over now. She's in custody. She's going to get help.
I hope so, he said.
I really hope so. Diana was eventually charged with breaking and entering and assault with a deadly weapon. She was sentenced to probation and court-mandated therapy. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was something. It was a step toward healing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The day after Diana was taken into custody, I woke up to a silence that felt different from any I had experienced before. It wasn't the heavy silence of waiting for the next blow, or the hollow silence of loneliness. It was a quiet that felt rened, a stillness that came after a storm had finally passed. I lay in bed for a long time, STA ring at the ceiling, letting my mind wander through the events of the past few months. The arguments, the accusations, the hospital, the courtroom, the shattered glass on my living room floor. It felt like a lifetime had been compressed into a few short months. I got up slowly, my joints creaking in protest, and made my way to the kitchen. The sunlight was streaming through the windows, casting warm golden rectangles across the floor. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the breakfast bar, the same spot where Mark had sat on that fateful Sunday, the spot where everything had a route to unravel, but the house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt like a home again. Elise called me that afternoon, her voice bright with excitement. Mom, I have some news. I've been thinking about what you said about taking a trip, and I had an idea. An idea, I repeated, taking a sip of my tea. What kind of idea? Remember how we used to talk about visiting Ireland? You and Dad always wanted to go, but you never got the chance. What if we went together, just the two of us? I felt a lump form in my throat. My husband had always dreamed of seeing the Irish countryside, of walking through the green hills and visiting the tiny villages where his grandparents had been born. We had talked about it for years, made plans that always fell through because of work or money or family obligations. And then he was gone, and the dream had died with him. Elise, that's... I paused, struggling to find the words. That's a wonderful idea, but I don't know if I'm ready. There's still so much going on here. The lawsuit, the divorce, Mark. The lawsuit is going to be dismissed, Elise said firmly. Patricia told me yesterday. Diana's lawyer is withdrawing. They know they don't have a case. And Mark is doing great. He's been going to therapy, he's got a new appointment, he's even rude dating someone. He doesn't need us hovering over him. He's dating someone. I asked, surprised. He hasn't mentioned that. He probably didn't want to jinx it, Elise laughed. But yes, a woman he met at his running club. Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher, she's kind, and she doesn't have a single manipulative bone in her body. Mark is smitten. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. My son was healing. He was moving on. He was finding happiness on his own terms. Okay, I said finally. Okay, let's do it. Let's go to Ireland. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and anticipation. Elise booked the flights and the hotels, and I spent hours researching all the places I wanted to see. The cliffs of Moher, the Ring of Kerry, the tiny pub in a village called Doolin where my husband's grandfather had supposedly played the fiddle. I was doing it for me, but I was also doing it for him, for the dream we had read but never fulfilled. Mark came over the night before we left, ryeing a bottle of wine and a sheepish grin. I heard you're running off to the Emerald Isle without me, he said, pulling me into a hug. You're more than welcome to come, I said, hugging him back. There's still time to book a ticket. He laughed, shaking his head. I think you and Elise need this time together. And besides, I've got a date this weekend. I don't want to cancel. Sarah, I said, raising an eyebrow. Elise told me about her. She sounds lovely. She is, Mark said, his face softening. She's different. She doesn't want anything from me. She just wants to be with me. It's strange. I'm not used to it. Get used to it, I said, squeezing his hand. You deserve it. We sat on the porch and watched the sun set, the sky turning shades of orange and pink and purple. Mark told me about Sarah, about their first date, about how nervous he had been, about how she had laughed at his jokes and listened to his stories without once checking her phone. I listened with a smile on my face, my heart full. Mom, he said suddenly, his voice serious. I want to say something. Something I've been meaning to say for a while. I turned to look at him. What is it, honey? I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said, STA ring at his hands. I know I made terrible mistakes. I said terrible things. I hurt you in ways I can never undo. But I want you to know that I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you didn't give up on me. I'm grateful that you gave me a second chance. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the son you deserve. I reached over and took his hand. Mark, you already are the son I deserve. You've always been. You just lost your way for a while. But you found your way back. And that's what matters. He blinked back TRS, and I blinked back my own. We sat there in comfortable silence, the weight of the past finally lifting, the future stretching out before us like an open road. The trip to Ireland was everything I had dreamed it would be, and more. Elise and I spent 2 weeks driving through the countryside, stopping at every castle and ruin and quaint little village we could find. We laughed at our terrible sense of direction. We argued about which pub had the best stew. We stood on the cliffs of Maher and watched the waves crash against the rocks below. One evening, we found ourselves in the village of Doolin, sitting in a tiny pub that smelled of peat smoke and old wood. I ordered a pint of Guinness and looked around at the locals, the musicians tuning their fiddles and flutes. I thought about my husband, about the stories he had told me, about the dream he had never been able to fulfill, and I raised my glass to his memory. "Here's to you, my love," I whispered. "We finally made it." Elise raised her own glass, her eyes glistening.
To Dad. And to you, Mom.
For making it happen. We clinked our glasses and drank, the rmth of the pub and the music washing over us like a blessing. I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years, a sense of closure that I hadn't even known I was looking for. When we got home, there was a letter waiting for me. It was from Diana, written on plain white stationery in CA refill, practiced handwriting. I opened it with a sense of trepidation, not sure what to expect. Our Eleanor. It began. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I have hurt you and your family in ways that can never be undone. But I wanted you to know that I'm getting help. I'm in therapy, and I'm rooting to understand why I did the things I did. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. Diana. I read the letter 3 times, trying to process the words. This wasn't the Diana I knew, the woman who had screamed at me and threatened me and broken into my house with a hammer. This was someone different, someone who was rooting to heal, someone who was trying to become better, that I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I was ready to. But I knew that I could acknowledge her effort. I could acknowledge her pain. And I could hope, for her sake, that she found the peace she was looking for. I put the letter in a drawer and closed it. Maybe someday I would write her back. But not today. Today was for me that the weeks turned into months and life settled into a new rhythm. Mark continued to see SA Raw, and their relationship grew stronger and more serious. He came to dinner every Sunday, and sometimes he brought SA Raw with him. She was everything he had said she was, kind and and genuine, and I found myself looking RD to her visits. Elise visited whenever she could, and we continued our tradition of long phone calls and weekend getaways. She was happy, too, in a way I hadn't seen in years. She had root dating someone as well, a fellow attorney named James who read her love of hiking and bad reality TV. And me, I was Leah running to be content. I was Leah running to enjoy the quiet moments, the simple pleasures, the joy of having my family back. I had my health, my home, my independence. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had everything I needed, but I knew that the money was still an issue, a specter that hung over our newfound peace. Mark had never asked me about the will again, never hinted that he expected anything from me. But I knew he thought about it. I knew the question was there, unspoken, lingering in the spaces between our conversations. I decided to address it head-on that one Sunday after dinner, I invited Mark and Elise to stay a little longer. I made coffee and brought out a plate of CEO keys, and we sat in the living room, the same room where so much had happened. "I want to talk to you both about something," I began, my heart pounding in my chest. "Something I've been thinking about for a while." Mark and Elise exchanged a look, and I could see the wariness in their eyes. They were bracing themselves for bad news, for another bombshell, for another upheaval. "Don't worry," I said, smiling. "It's not bad news. It's actually good news. I've decided to change the will. Again." Mark opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish," I said. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I want my legacy to be, and I realized that it's not about the money. It's about the people I love. It's about the life I've built. And I want to make sure that life continues, even after I'm gone. I took a deep breath and continued. I'm setting up trusts for both of you. Not huge amounts, but enough to give you a safety net. Enough to help you with a down payment on a house or to pay for your children's education. I'm also setting up a scholarship fund in your father's name, and I'm donating a portion of the estate to the hospital where I worked. But the rest, the bulk of it, I'm going to use to travel, to see the world, to do all the things I never had the chance to do. Marksta read at me, his mouth hanging open. Mom, that's incredible. I'm not doing it for you, I said firmly. I'm doing it for me. I've spent my whole life taking care of everyone else. It's time I took care of myself. But I wanted you to know, I wanted you to understand that I'm not cutting you out. I'm just changing the rules. Elise leaned forward and took my hand. I think it's wonderful, Mom. I think it's exactly what you should do. Mark nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I agree. I think it's perfect. I smiled, the warmth of their approval washing over me. I had been so afraid of this conversation, so afraid of the anger and resentment it might provoke. But instead, I found acceptance. I found love. I want you both to promise me something, I said, looking from Mark to Elise. Promise me that you'll live your lives. Not for me, not for anyone else, but for yourselves. Promise me that you'll take risks and make mistakes and learn from them. Promise me that you'll be happy. We promise, they said in unison, and we all laughed. We spent the rest of the evening talking about the future, about our plans and our dreams. Mark told us about his idea to start a small business, a coffee shop that would also serve as a community space. Elise talked about her plans to open her own firm, to practice law on her own terms. And I told them about my travel plans, all the places I wanted to see, all the adventures I wanted to have. It was the best night I'd had in years. Maybe ever. After they left, I stood on the porch and watched their cars drive away, the taillights fading into the darkness. The house was quiet behind me, but it wasn't the quiet of loneliness. It was the quiet of peace. I had come a long way from that Sunday dinner when Mark had asked me for $50,000. I had faced my demons and come out the other side. I had rebuilt my relationship with my son and strengthened my bond with my daughter. I had made peace with my past and embraced my future. I didn't know what the next chapter of my life would bring, but I knew that I was ready for it. I knew that I had the strength and the courage and the love to face whatever came my way, and for the first time in a very long time, I was excited to see what would happen next. The letter from Diana's attorney arrived on a Friday afternoon, and I knew before I opened it that it wasn't going to be good news. There was something about the weight of the envelope, the official look of the return address, that made my stomach drop. I set it on the kitchen counter, and read at it for a long time, trying to prepare myself for whatever was inside. When I finally tore it open, I felt a cold dread wash over me. Diana was appealing the divorce settlement. She was claiming that she had been coerced into signing the papers, that she had been under duress, that Mark had threatened her. It was a desperate move, a last-ditch effort to hold onto something that had already slipped through her fingers. But it was also a threat, a reminder that she wasn't done with us, that she would never be done with us. I called Mark immediately, my voice shaking with Reli's suppressed anger. Mark, I just got a letter from Diana's attorney. She's appealing the divorce settlement. She's claiming you coerced her. There was a long silence on the other end. When Mark finally spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. I knew she would. I knew she wouldn't let it go. She's never been able to let anything go. What are we going to do? I asked. We can't just let her get away with this. We fight, he said, his voice hardening. We fight, and we win. I'm not going to let her take anything else from me. She's already taken too much. I felt a surge of pride at his words. This was the Mark I had raised, the one who didn't back down from a fight. He had been beaten down and broken, but he was still standing. He was still fighting it. Okay, I said. We fight. And we win. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal motions and emotional strain. Diana's lawyer, a Shah RP-tongued woman named Mrs. Chen, filed every motion she could think of, dragging out the process and running up MARK's legal fees. She deposed MARK's therapist, his friends, his co-workers. She even tried to depose me, but Patricia shut that down quickly, citing the fact that I had already given a statement to the police about Diana's break-in. The strain was visible on MARK. He lost weight. The circles under his eyes grew darker. His smile became less frequent. I tried to support him as best I could, cooking him meals, listening to him vent, reminding him that he was strong enough to get through this, but there were times when I worried that he wouldn't make it. Times when I saw the old MARK, the defeated MARK, peeking through the cracks in his merit one evening. He came to my house in a state of agitation, his hands shaking as he paced back and forth in my living room. "Mom, I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice cracking. "I can't keep fighting her. She's never going to stop. She's never going to let me go. And I don't know how much more I can take." I stood up and walked over to him, taking his hands in mine and forcing him to stop pacing. "MARK, look at me." He looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. "You can do this," I said firmly. "You're stronger than you think. You've been through so much already, and you're still standing. You're still fighting. That takes courage. That takes strength. And I am so proud of you." He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "But what if I lose? What if she wins? What if she takes everything I've worked so hard to build? Then you rebuild," I said. "You start over. You've done it before and you'll do it again. Because that's who you are. You're a survivor, MARK. And no one, not even Diana, can take that away from you." He read at me, his expression softening. "How do you always know what to say?" "Because I'm your mother," I said, pulling him into a hug. "It's my job." He hugged me back, his body trembling with exhaustion and emotion. We stood there for a long time, holding each other, the weight of the world slowly lifting from his shoulders. "You're right," he said finally, pulling back. "You're right. I can't let her win. I've come too far to give up now." "That's my boy," I said, smiling through my own tears. The legal battle dragged on for another 2 months, but MARK didn't waver. He showed up to every hearing, every deposition, every meeting with his attorney. He answered every question with patience and honesty, refusing to let Diana's tactics provoke him, and finally, the day came when the judge ruled in his favor. Diana's appeal was denied. The divorce was final. She had no more legal recourse. I was in the courtroom when the judge delivered his ruling, and I watched my son's face transform from anxiety to relief to joy. It was over. Finally, truly over. Afterward, we went out to celebrate, just the two of us. We went to the same diner where we had gone after the first divorce hearing, and we ordered the same burgers and milkshakes. It felt like a full-circle moment, a closure to a chapter that had been dragging on for far too long. "To freedom," MARK said, raising his milkshake. "To freedom," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, and then MARK spoke again. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said slowly. "I want to take you somewhere. Just the two of us. A trip. Somewhere special." I raised an eyebrow. "Where were you thinking?" "Remember when you and Dad used to talk about going to Italy, you always said you wanted to see the Amalfi Coast, to eat real Italian food, to drink wine in a vineyard road." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "We used to talk about it all the time." "I want to take you there," MARK said. "I want to be the one to make that dream come true. I know I can't replace Dad. I know I can't undo the past. But I want to be the one who takes you to Italy. I want to give you that." I blinked back TRS, overwhelmed by the gesture. "MARK, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he interrupted. "I want to. I want to show you that I'm not the same person I used to be. I want to show you that I've changed. That I'm better. That I can be the son you deserve." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You already are the son I deserve. You've always been. But I would love to go to Italy with you. I would love that more than anything." We planned the trip for the spring, and the anticipation made the long winter months be a rabble. Mark took charge of the logistics, booking flights and hotels, and researching the best restaurants. He was meticulous and thoughtful, and I found myself looking forward to the trip with a joy I hadn't felt in years. But just before we were supposed to leave, disaster struck. I woke up one morning with a sharp pain in my chest, the kind of pain that made me gasp and clutch my ribs. I tried to brush it off, convinced it was just indigestion, but the pain didn't go away. It worsened, spreading to my left arm and my jaw. I knew the signs. I had seen them hundreds of times in the ER. And I knew that I didn't have much time. I managed to call 911 before the pain became too overwhelming. I heard the operator's voice, calm and professional, telling me to stay on the line, that help was on the way. And then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping monitors and fluorescent lights. The first face I saw was Mark's, his eyes red and swollen, his face pale with worry. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "You're awake. Thank God. You're awake." "What happened?" I asked, my voice weak. "You had a heart attack," he said, taking my hand. "A mild one. They were able to treat it with a stent. But the doctor said you were lucky. If you had waited any longer..." He couldn't finish the sentence, and I squeezed his hand to reassure him. "I'm okay," I said.
I'm okay. Mark.
"I'm right here." Elise arrived a few hours later, having flown in as soon as she heard the news. She looked exhausted and worried, but relief flooded her face when she saw that I was awake and alert. "Mom, USCA read the hell out of us," she said, kissing my forehead. "Don't ever do that again." "I'll try my best," I said, managing a weak smile. The doctors kept me in the hospital for a few days, running tests and monitoring my recovery. They told me I would need to make some lifestyle changes, cut back on stress, eat healthier, exercise more. They also told me that I was lucky to be alive. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt SCA red. SCA red of the future. SCA red of the unknown. SCA red of leaving my children before I was ready. Mark and Elise stayed by my side the whole time, taking turns sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, making sure I had everything I needed. It was a reverse of the roles we had played for so many years, and it felt strange to be the one being taken of. "Mom," Mark said one evening, "I want to talk to you about something." "What is it?" I asked, setting down my book. "I've been thinking about the trip," he said. "I want to postpone it. I don't think you're ready to travel, and I don't think I'm ready to lose you. I want to wait until you're stronger." I shook my head.
No, Mark.
"We're not postponing it. We're going to go just like we planned. I'm not going to let a little heart attack ruin my dreams." "Mom, it wasn't a little heart attack," he said, his voice strained. "It was a heart attack. You could have died." "But I didn't," I said firmly. "I'm still here. And I'm still going to Italy. We both need this trip, Mark. We need it to move four-way road. We need it to heal." He read at me for a long moment, his expression torn. And then he sighed a long, weary sound. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, we'll go. But if you are feeling even a little bit off, we're coming straight back." "Deal, deal," I said, smiling. We went to Italy a month later, and it was everything I had dreamed it would be. The Amalfi Coast was breathtaking, a stunning stretch of cliffs and turquoise water that looked like it had been painted by a master artist. We ate pasta and drank wine and laughed until our stomachs hurt. We walked through ancient ruins and wandered through narrow cobblestone streets. We made memories that I would treasure for the rest of my life. One evening, we were sitting on a terrace overlooking the sea, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink. Mark was quiet, rang out at the water, and I could see the weight of the past few months pressing down on him. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching over to touch his arm. He nodded, but I could see the TRS in his eyes. "I was just thinking about how close I came to losing you. How close I came to losing everything." "You didn't lose me," I said softly. "I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." He turned to look at me, his expression raw with emotion. I love you, Mom. I love you so much. And I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I'm sorry for being such an idiot. I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. You're not an idiot. You're a man who made mistakes and Leah reneged from them. That's all any of us can do. We sat there on the terrace, watching the sun sink below the horizon, the weight of the past finally lifting. It was the best moment of the trip, maybe the best moment of my life. I knew that there would be challenges ahead. The HERT attack had been a wake-up call, a reminder that my time on this EARTH was finite. I didn't know how much time I had left, but I knew that I wanted to spend it doing the things that mattered. Being with the people I loved, making memories, living my life to the fullest. And as I sat there with my son, watching the stars begin to emerge in the darkening sky, I felt a peace that I had never known. A peace that came from letting go of the past and embracing the future. It was a new beginning. For both of us, the sun was setting over the Ligurian Sea, casting a golden path across the water that seemed to stretch all the way to the horizon. I was sitting on the terrace of our little hotel in Cinque Terre, a glass of local wine in my hand, watching the fishing boats bob in the harbor below. Mark had gone to the village to pick up some bread and cheese for dinner, and I was alone with my thoughts for the first time in weeks. It had been 6 months since the HERT attack. 6 months of physical therapy, of diet re-changes, of Leah learning to listen to my body in ways I never had before. 6 months of rebuilding my strength and my confidence. 6 months of realizing that I was not invincible, but I was also not done. Not yet. The doctors had cleared me for travel, and I had taken full advantage of it. After Italy, Mark, and I had gone to Greece, then France, then Spain. I had seen the Acropolis, walked along the Seine, danced in a flamenco bar in Seville. I had done things I never thought I would do, seen places I had only ever dreamed of. And every step of the way, Mark had been by my side, steady and supportive and present in a way he had never been before. But this trip was different. This trip was solo. Mark had gone back to work, and Ra had convinced him to take a weekend trip to the mountains with her. Elise was buried in a big case. And I, for the first time in my life, had decided to travel alone. It had been a terrifying decision, one that had kept me up at night for weeks. I had never traveled alone. I had always been part of a unit, a wife, a mother, a nurse. I had always been defined by my relationships to others. But in the wake of the HERT attack, I had realized that I didn't know who I was without them. And I needed to find out. So here I was, sitting on a terrace in Italy, watching the sun set over the sea, utterly and completely alone. And it was glorious. I took a sip of my wine and let the flavors wash over me, the crisp acidity, the subtle notes of cherry and EAR. I had never been much of a wine drinker before, but Italy had changed that. Italy had changed a lot of things. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The fight with Mark, the will, the lawsuit, the break-in, the HERT attack. It had been a tumultuous few years, a roller coaster of emotion and conflict and upheaval. But I had come out the other side, stronger, wiser, more myself than I had ever been. I thought about Diana. 2. I had heard through the grapevine that she was doing better. She had completed her therapy, route a new job, even reconnected with some old friends. She was still a complicated person, still prone to drama and manipulation, but she was trying. That was more than I could have said for her a year ago. I had never written her back. I had thought about it many times, had even route a few letters. But I could never find the right words. I couldn't forgive her. Not fully. Not for everything she had done. But I could acknowledge her efforts. I could wish her well. And I could let go of the anger that had been poisoning me for so long. In the end, I had decided to write her a short note. Just a few words, sent through her attorney. I received your letter. I'm glad you're getting help. I hope you find peace. Eleanor. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something.
It was a step.
Mark had been surprised when I told him. You wrote to her after everything she did. Yes, I had said. Because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I'm done being poisoned. He had STA read at me for a long moment, and then he had hugged me. "You're a better person than me, Mom." "I don't know about that," I had said, hugging him back. "I just know that I'm tired of CA lying all this weight." The sun was sinking lower now, the sky turning shades of deep orange and purple. I finished my wine and set the glass down, and I STA root to think about the future, about what came next. I had been thinking about it a lot these past few months, about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, about what kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind. I had already changed the will, setting up trusts for Mark and Elise, donating to the hospital and the Scholarship Fund. But there was more I could do. There was always more that I had always been a nurse. It was the one constant in my life, the thread that had held me together through all the chaos. I had loved my job, had loved helping people, had loved making a difference in the world. But I had retired years ago, and I had never found a way to fill that void. What if I went back not to nursing, not to the long shifts and the backbreaking work, but to something else? Something that used my skills, my compassion, my experience. Something that mattered. I thought about the Scholarship Fund, the money I had set aside for aspiring nurses. I thought about the hospital where I had worked, the young nurses who were just STA rooting out, the patients who needed someone to fight for them. And I had an idea that what if I created a program, a mentorship program for new nurses, something that paired experienced veterans with fresh graduates. Something that provided guidance and support and a sense of community. Something that would help the next generation of nurses thrive. It was ambitious. It was complicated. It would take time and money and effort. But it was also exactly the kind of thing I had been looking for. Something that would use my skills, my experience, my passion. Something that would make a difference. I STA root planning it that night, sitting on the terrace with a notebook and a pen, sketching out ideas and goals and milestones. I worked until the sky was fully dark, until the STARS came out and the crickets began to chirp. And when I finally went inside, I felt a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I called Mark. "I've been thinking about something," I said. "Something I want to do." "What is it?" he asked, his voice warm with curiosity. "I want to START a mentorship program at the hospital. A program for new nurses. I want to give back. I want to make a difference." There was a long pause on the other end. "Mom, that's amazing. That's the kind of thing you were born to do." "I know," I said, smiling. "I just didn't realize it until now." We talked for another hour, hashing out details and ideas. Mark was enthusiastic, offering to help with the logistics and the funding. Elise, when I called her later, was equally supportive. "You're going to be great at this, Mom," she said. "You were always the best mentor. I remember when I was a kid, you used to bring home young nurses for dinner, the ones who were struggling. You would sit with them for hours, listening to their problems, giving them advice. You changed their lives."
I had forgotten about that.
Forgotten the young nurses I had taken under my wing, the ones who had come to me for advice and support. I had been doing this my whole life. I just hadn't called it a program. The rest of the trip was a blur of planning and dreaming. I went to Florence, to Rome, to Venice. I visited the Uffizi Gallery and the Vatican, ate gelato in the Piazza Navona, rode a gondola through the canals of Venice. But every night, I returned to my hotel room and worked on my plans. I drafted a proposal, created a budget, made a list of potential partners. I was building something new, something mined out. When I finally returned home, I hit the ground running. I met with the hospital administrators, presented my proposal, secured the funding. I recruited a team of experienced nurses to serve as mentors. I designed a curriculum and a schedule. I poured every ounce of energy into this project because it was the most important thing I had ever done. The program launched 6 months later, and it was a success from the very beginning. Young nurses flocked to it, eager for guidance and support. Experienced nurses volunteered their time, excited to share their wisdom and experience. The hospital administration praised it as a model for other institutions. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt like I had found my place in the world, that I didn't stop traveling, didn't stop exploring, didn't stop living. But I had found a new purpose, a new way to make a difference. I had found a way to honor the legacy of my husband, my CA rear, my life. One evening, after a particularly successful mentoring session, I sat in my living room with Mark and Elise. We were drinking tea and eating CEO keys, just like we used to do when they were children. Mom, Mark said, setting down his cup, I have something to tell you. Something I've been meaning to say for a while. What is it? I asked, curious. Essay raw and I re-getting ma ride, he said, a huge grin spreading across his face. We're engaged. I gasped, TRS springing to my eyes. Mark, that's wonderful. That's the best news. Elise squealed and hugged her brother. I'm so happy for you. When did this happen? A few days ago, he said, his cheeks flushed with excitement. I proposed at the top of the mountain, the one we hiked last weekend. She said yes. I stood up and pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. I'm so proud of you, Mark. You've come so far. You deserve this happiness. Thanks, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't have done it without you. Of course you could have, I said, pulling back to look at him. You're stronger than you think. You always have been. We spent the rest of the evening celebrating, talking about wedding plans and future dreams. It was a perfect night, the kind of night I had always hoped for but never quite believed would come, and as I sat there, watching my children laugh and talk and plan for the future, I realized that this was what it was all about. This was the legacy I had always wanted to leave. Not money or property or a name, but love, connection. Family at the program continued to grow and flourish, and I continued to mentor young nurses, sharing my experience and wisdom with the next generation. I traveled to new places, made new friends, experienced new adventures. I lived my life to the fullest, every single day. And when I finally passed, years later, surrounded by my children and grandchildren, I knew that I had done what I set out to do. I had left a mark on the world. I had made a difference. I had lived a life that mattered. The will was exactly as I had planned it, the trusts and donations and scholarships fully distributed. But the real legacy was the people I had touched, the lives I had changed, the love I had given and received. That was the thing that would last. That was the thing that mattered. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about the people. It was about the love. And I had finally, after all these years, Leah reneged to let go of everything else.